The Cambridgeshire group, situated in the unspoilt Fenlands, has kindly allowed one of their meetings to be filmed to show what a typical SIGnet meeting entails. In this excerpt from September 2012, they discuss the investment case for China.
Now, I've got a few notes here, but I'll perhaps just very quickly run through those just to set the scene a little bit. Almost certainly the economy is slowing. Manufacturing fell to a 9-month low in August. Purchasing Managers Index fell to 49.2, which is the lowest since November of last year. China's expansion had a major effect upon commodity prices, and virtually all the increase in demand for metals has come from China, for tin, nickel, lead, zinc, aluminium, copper, iron ore, etc. And a 30% increase in global oil supplies. The slowdown would be reflected in profits for mining companies, BHP, Rio Tinto, Anglo American, Antofagasta Valley in Brazil, etc., and probably some major oil companies if the demand falls away. Also suppliers to China of production machinery, for example, and infrastructure spending on roads, bridges, railways, airports, docks, power generation, gas pipelines has been pretty enormous. And I think you have to accept that countries don't keep on spending on infrastructure. I mean, there's a fair bit to go probably yet.
Because luxury goods are still doing pretty well, aren't they?
I think we need to delineate the problem in a minute about what parts of the Chinese economy we think we might be invested in, because I don't think we can look upon China as one big rolled up thing. It's like there's various elements of China, aren't some of which still look pretty promising, I'd say, and some of which don't look promising. And
you have got, in fact, a growing middle class in China, and I think that's probably that's about 400 million people. The wages in certainly the eastern seaboard, where much of the manufacturing is taking place for export, have risen in double figures for the last 2 years. Now, some of the people who source goods out of Asia are beginning to say China now is getting more expensive, and they're now moving the purchasing to possibly say like Vietnam or Indonesia, something like that, because if you get double figure wage increases for 2 consecutive years, that's beginning to become less competitive. So that would be another factor in there. Also, of course, you've got a situation where the US and Europe, 2 big markets for Chinese exports, are not as buoyant as they were.
Growth has been 10 or 11%.
Been in double figures, down to about 8% they're talking about now, 7 or 8,
So it's horrific, this drop. But in actual fact, 7 or 8% is still a fair rate of knots. And yet you look and you say that this move from a rural farming population to being city dwellers is meaning, I can't remember, it was about a year ago I read an article in The Economist about the number of cities the size of London they're having to build to accommodate this change. And it was phenomenal. And it was going to go on for another 5 to 10 years.
There is, of course, a way they can get around it. I mean, the eastern seaboard is where all the action has been, and yes, a lot of people have moved from the hinterland to the eastern seaboard because the wages are so much better than the agricultural sort of scene. You just think about it for a minute. You go and set up a production facility in Suffolk because of its proximity to Felixstowe for exports. Then the wage rates go up a lot in the area. So then you've got a choice. You may well be able to switch it, say, to Wales, where the wages would be a lot lower. But you've got a transport cost. But if the infrastructure is in place, where you can put it on rail overnight or something, the cost probably is worth it in relation to the saving you've got on
China
labour.
haven't got that infrastructure.
They're getting it.
They're getting it rapidly.
They are moving inland with the production facilities.
I'm sceptical that you've actually got enough consumption of, sort of cheap goods that you're going to actually absorb all that capacity from internal demand. I mean, where does all this stuff go? I mean, do the Chinese suddenly want all these goods that are being consumed in
They must wonder
America?
what the hell the Western people want all this rubbish for.
What does it do? I mean, it's probably quite...
Well, if you listen to Hugh Henry, his main worries are, first of the banks, he reckons they're all bankrupt. All the banks have gone. Misallocation of resources.
What was the man's name?
Hugh Hendry. His basic premise is that China is too expensive and he's going to speculate against it. And he's done this in various ways. One of the main way that he has done it recently is by shorting Japanese suppliers to China.
Well, there was a time, not so many years ago, when the wage rates in China were less than £50 a month.
Yes.
When all this Chinese thing first sort of began to occur, didn't it? About £30 a month, I think, was fairly typical sort of wages, which was way, way, way below anything that you could do in the Western world. And obviously that's why it took off. Now it's getting to the stage where it's getting more expensive. And therefore now people are looking, buyers are looking to other parts of Asia that haven't reached this stage yet.
Are you optimistic on China then, Roy, or are you pessimistic?
I think I'm very cautious.
Do you think the change of government in China will, if anything's going to change, it's going to change at the time of a leadership change, isn't it?
Possibly.
I mean, what traditionally happens if it was a company is the new chief executive comes in and kitchen sinks everything, said everything's bloody awful, and unfortunately the last lot made a terrible job of it, and
It's not going
But China is
to
on.
happen in China, is
Not
it?
their way, is it?
But
I
China's
don't
a bit
think
like
so.
a
No, I can't
hamster.
see that
China's a
happening.
bit like a hamster on his wheel.
yes.
But they're not going
So
to do
they've
anything
really
dramatic.
got to keep it going
Some-
one way or
The
another.
worst television I've ever seen, I've seen plenty of it, is Chinese television where they're showing their leadership and their parliaments. Because you've never seen such a lot of stuffed dummies in all your life.
Yeah.
It's just going through, it comes over as just completely going through the motions. There's no passion. It's completely premeditated, and the whole thing, it's just like po-faced people just speaking to a script.
Okay, folks, time to go home. Who is the chairman for